Tonight, the impeachment inquiry is entering a new phase. Democrats releasing these interview transcripts for the first time that detail, in the words of the people involved, Trump's attempted bribery plot, and also new tonight, the first ever dates for the public hearings that we've been discussing. Now, some Republicans who had called for this exact type of public information are now saying they won't even look at the evidence.
I'm not going to read these transcripts. The whole process is a joke. What I can tell you about the Trump policy toward the Ukraine, it was incoherent. It depends on who you talk to. They seem to be incapable of forming a quid pro quo. So, no, I find the whole process to be a sham, and I'm not going to legitimize it. I don't care what Sunderland presumes. Show me where there's a quid pro quo.
So we've reached that phase. Show me where there's a quid pro quo. Now, that is a bit of classic lawyering, and Lindsey Graham is a former military attorney. He's doing something very particular here. He's trying to remind everyone the burden of proof is on those making an accusation, which is true. But here's the other part of that. The House investigators are showing proof of their accusation. They have Trump's hand-picked diplomat who just reversed himself to admit bribery, Trump's own chief of staff who confirmed a quid pro quo, going full Mulvaney in that moment of televised candor before he tried to walk it back.
Did he also mention to me in the past the corruption related to the DNC server? Absolutely. No question about that.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo.
We do that all the time with foreign policy. But that's it. And that's why we held up the money.
That's why. Add to that, on the burden of proof side, for evidence, the decorated Army officer, Alexander Vindman. Experts have called him something of an unimpeachable witness in this impeachment probe. Or take today's news, this new full transcript from diplomat Bill Taylor, plus Trump aide Tim Morrison. Altogether, that's at least 5 officials confirming the bribery plot. Show me the proof. Consider it shown, say the Democrats. Now, what about some of Trump's most influential media defenders? Well, they have a different issue. They've already boxed themselves, some of them, into denying bribery because before Trump made his defense clear, they went on record saying that if there was this evidence of a bribery plot, like conditioning money on going after Biden, that would be wrong.
If the president said, you know, I'll give you the money, but you got to investigate Joe Biden, that is really off the rails wrong.
Right.
But if it's something else, you know, it would be nice to know what it is.
Off the rails wrong. What does that same Fox anchor say today? Well, he's going full Mulvaney with, well, this is just what we do all the time.
Anytime the United States gives money to other countries, aren't there always strings attached? We're going to give you this money, but you need to do this.
It's called diplomacy.
Is it called diplomacy? I want to pause here for a quick and easy legal primer. Crime is always about more than an isolated action. It's about action and intent, what you mean to do. Let's just take a very simple hypothetical. If you push someone so they don't get hit by an oncoming car, the action is pushing, but not a violent crime. Well, I'm going to get to Blagojevich. Let's hold off on Blagojevich. Come back. Let me put it like this. And that's Blagojevich. He's an example coming up. But if you push someone to hurt them, that becomes obviously a violent crime. Now, the same goes for corruption law. If a U.S. official deploys Pentagon money to pressure another country to help the U.S., that example on Fox News, then that's the action. And that would be just diplomacy, which is not a crime. Now, here's the legal part. If the same official deploys that money to help themselves, that corrupt intent makes the same action a crime. And that's how corruption law has landed. Here we go. A guy you might remember, Rod Blagojevich, in prison. And he was a governor, and he had, of course, the power to take the action of filling a vacant Senate seat. It's when he tried to abuse the power and enrich himself and take money for the same action of picking a senator, it was that corrupt intent that made the action a crime. Now, what I'm telling you may sound pretty straightforward, and you may think, okay, Ari, well, surely members of Congress know this, right? And the answer is yes. 49% of the senators have law degrees. They're all steeped in this. They all take an oath pledging to use their power for the public interest. They know all about the difference between strings and diplomacy and legislating or selling those things for themselves. That becomes the crime. And these arguments have become so clear that may be why some of Trump's political defenders are trying to avoid discussing these details at all and instead just demand somebody else show the proof or saying, as Lindsey Graham did, we won't even look at the evidence. And tonight, that brings us to something extra we want to show you. We checked the archives for how the defenses of Nixon began to evolve as the evidence got worse. And it seemed to start to turn away from the evidence and towards more of these blanket proclamations of simple loyalty.
I'm not going to entertain impeaching the president over this matter. Period. Done.
On Watergate, Mr. Nixon's friends are very few. One still loyal is conservative Indiana Republican Earl Landgrave, who said today, "I'm sticking by my president, even if he and I have to be taken out of this building and shot."
Wow. When did that congressman say that? Was it before the tapes came out or before the Supreme Court was ruling against Nixon? No. It was after all of that. It was actually one day before Richard Nixon resigned, and that very member of, basically, that member of Congress, his partisanship was punished by the voters. They actually replaced him a few months later. Now, there aren't many historical precedents for what happens when you impeach a president, but history does show there can be times where evidence overtakes partisanship and loyalty. That's true for elected officials and voters alike. Are we headed towards one of those times? Well, we have the perfect experts to get into all of that when we're back in just 30 seconds. I'm joined now from the White House by NPR White House reporter Ayesha Rascoe and the Atlantic's David Frum, who was a former White House speechwriter for George W. Bush. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
David, let me start with you on the box that we saw some people publicly put themselves in if they want to defend Trump, but they previously said, obviously, proof of a bribery plot would be bad.
Right. Well, they started off with a stupid argument, and partly because maybe it was embarrassing, they retreated to a depraved argument. The stupid argument is not to see what's in front of you. The depraved argument is to justify what's in front of you.
Ayesha?
Well, it seems like at first they were trying to say that, you know, they were basically focusing on process. They were talking about the whistleblower only had secondhand information. And then when you have all of these people coming out with firsthand information, now you have people on the Hill saying, well, is it really firsthand information? Does the top diplomat for this administration, Bill Taylor, for Ukraine, does he actually know what was going on? He thought that, and from everything that he could see, that that aid was being held up in exchange for these investigations. But now they're calling even that into question.
Well, as they call it into question, I want to turn to some of your expert questioning. This is your first time on the beat, but we do keep a close eye on which questions that work and don't. So first for you, and then following from David, this incredible moment in the briefing room. Obviously, several reporters engaged on it, but here you were going back and forth when Mick Mulvaney first went full Mulvaney. Take a look.
DNC server.
That it's okay for the U.S. government to hold up aid and require a foreign government to investigate political opponents of the president.
Now, you're saying the President of the United States, the chief law enforcement person, cannot ask somebody to cooperate with an ongoing public investigation into wrongdoing? That's just bizarre to me.
Are you saying that the money that was held up, that had nothing to do with Biden?
The money held up had absolutely nothing to do with Biden.
Over the course of that appearance, he ultimately conceded and defended the bribery plot. We do it all the time, get over it, then walked it back. With the benefit now of some time, and you're in that same very room, how is that playing out for the White House as other officials seem to be going back to full Mulvaney?
Well, it hasn't really played out very well for the White House in the sense that they can't get one message. So Mulvaney had to walk that back. During that, when I was asking him those questions, he said there were three things, that there were three reasons why they held up the money. One of them was that open investigation into the DNC server. He had to walk that back, but now they're saying, oh, that would be totally fine if they asked about that. He also said right then that there was nothing about Biden in this. But now we're hearing testimony that they wanted that statement to mention Burisma, that they wanted the statement that Ukraine would put out to specifically mention that so that Biden would be implicated, that Biden has been all through what they were trying to do. So all of that stuff is coming back on them. And I think what you're seeing now is the White House is kind of scrambling. They now have hired they're bringing in two people to join the communications office. One of them is Pam Bondi, Bondi, a Florida attorney. And so she's coming in to basically help to do their messaging for impeachment. And this is a White House that had said they would never set up a war room for impeachment because the president did nothing wrong.
David?
When you get into a scandal in the third year of an administration, that scandal takes place across a backdrop where the country has a pretty good fix on what they think of the administration. And so this is all happening in a context where President Trump and his people are saying, look, we've got a version of the facts. You have to believe us. And big majorities of Americans say, we don't believe you. We think you're liars all the time. Well, you have to understand, says the president's team, that when we did this, we're doing this for a public reason, not for the president's self-interest. Big majorities of the country say, we think Donald Trump puts his self-interest ahead of the country's interest. We don't believe you. And the last thing is, well, we're going to mobilize our base and they will defend us. And as we saw from Mississippi, where the president's party just won 53% of the vote in Bellwether, Mississippi, and in Kentucky, the president's base is too small to save him.
Yeah, I mean, you lay that out, David, as someone who's worked in and around these Republican politics. Obviously, the White House, whatever their public statement is going to notice that, particularly, as you say, in red states, particularly where the bottom line is they're losing ground. And that does go to what the message is and whether even people inclined to want to believe it feel like it's just too unbelievable or too counter to U.S. national security interests, which is something a lot of people across the spectrum tend to care about. They don't really want to hear about or believe that the president is actively working for foreign interests or self-interest above our security, because our men and women fight and die for that. With that in mind, take a look at one of the Fox News arguments we've been hearing, David. I showed one person who'd moved around. Here's a guest on Fox. Take a look.
Should they have been asked to investigate the Bidens for violations of Ukrainian law? No. Should the aid have been dragged out after Congress passed it and the president signed legislation to give it to them? No. But at the end, I think, their best defense is going to be no harm, no foul.
What do you think of that? I give credit where it's due. That's a former prosecutor who was conservative.
I know Andy, yeah.
You know Andy. Tucker Carlson wrote a piece early on that seemed to put a marker down that said this stuff actually is bad. It's just not worth impeaching over.
8 Ukrainian soldiers died in the month of August because they didn't have proper weapons. 50 Ukrainian soldiers were killed and wounded in the month of September. There were harms and there were fouls. There are dead people. That there is a shooting war going on in Ukraine. The United States has undertaken to help Ukraine. Congress voted massively to help Ukraine. Soldiers died while waiting for weapons that President Trump delayed.
And we're out of time, but Aisha, what's the big question you think is important to get at the hearings next week?
Well, I think the big question will be what exactly did Bill Taylor know, and when did he know it, and why does he feel so certain that it was an exchange that the White House wanted for these investigations to give up the aid?
All interesting questions, which is how we started this segment. My thanks to both of you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.